Hello, I'm Michelle Samaniego. Welcome to Lumio Part 2. Today we're going to go over our learning intentions and success criteria for this training, and then we're going to focus on the shout it out. The other items that you see on this agenda will be covered in future trainings. Our learning intention is that we are learning how to evaluate Lumio resources and adapt them to meet the needs of our students. And we are learning how to provide access to Lumio lessons to students in a variety of formats. Today, your success criteria will be that you can customize the text, background, and layout of a Shout It Out in Lumio. Here you see an example of a Shout It Out in Lumio. This Shout It Out has not been started, so if I wanted to get this going, I would click Start for Class. This opens up the Shout It Out to make it accessible for the students in the class. As you can see, it pops up to say join my Lumio. Students would go to Hello Smart and then enter this class ID to take part in my Shout It Out. Now, once it's used, you can see this says, how have you used Lumio so far? I would have all of you post some ideas about how you've been using it in your classroom so far. I can also go in and look at the responses. Now, if I do this with a morning class and then I want to erase everything and start fresh again for the afternoon, I just hit end and that ends the activity for the morning. And then when I go back in for my afternoon class, I can hit start and then start new activity. And that would erase all of the previous responses and give students then the opportunity to connect to the class. Now, pause for just a minute and think about how you could use the Shout It Out in your classroom. The great thing is that it does allow students to have a voice. Students can respond anonymously, or you can sort answers as the teacher by the type of response. Now, we can also use it as part of our instruction. We could use this as a quick formative assessment, maybe for a little SEL check in. We can also use it to check for understanding. Now, what might make this tool effective, though, is to make the text bigger or maybe add in some picture or a colored background, maybe some images to support the thinking. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. So, why would you want to customize your shout out? Now, the main thing is our standard shout out, it has very small text. It does have that plain gray background. And it's the good thing about it, though, is that you can go in if you're in the middle of a lesson and quickly add in an activity or a shout it out to just get immediate feedback. Now, the improved shout it out would allow you to customize your background. You can add colors, you can add pictures, you can add graphics. You might make the font larger for easier readability. You can add images to provide context to the question, and this might make it a little bit more engaging for the students. So we can use this customize shout it out to really meet our students' needs. Take a look at this example. These are a few examples of ways that Shout It Out has been customized. Here you see a health example where they added a colored background to each category. Now, each of these is a PowerPoint slide with a colored background, and then they ended up saving it as a JPEG. This differentiates before, during, and after exercise by adding in the 3 columns. So, this is one way that you can customize your slide. Here's another idea. This is for social studies. And here, a JPEG has been added of a PowerPoint slide in order to give it a colored background with large text and images. This would support understanding of the question, and it gives lots of space for students to respond. Here you see a math example. Each column has a colored background so that students could add numerals, pictures, and words to show their thinking. This is an improvement to the original Shout It Out. They do use the columns, but then add images behind each column to show items in each category for reduce, reuse, and recycle. So now you're going to have some work time. We'd really like each of you to create a shout it out slide. Now, you can use the traditional, just shout it out the way it is, or you might increase the text size and customize your background by creating a PowerPoint slide and then inserting it to the shout it out. You can also add columns and customize by adding images. So let's go ahead and take a look at how you would do that. I'm going to end my lesson. I'm going to come over here to new. And in new, this is where you're going to go to shout it out. Here's a video if you want a reminder of how to use the shout it out. That pops up there for you. I'm going to close that. Here's an example of doing it with categories. Now, categories is the one you saw that had the columns and things like that. You could name your categories. So let's say I'm doing characterization. Maybe I want students to sort and organize external character traits and internal character traits. Over here is where you can allow the max number of contributions per student, and then you're going to hit next. So the classic is just going to be the gray background where it allows students to put things in, or if you go into custom, this is where you can add in some images. So now I'm going to choose the images. So when I click up here on the image, I can find an image on my computer by selecting an image, going into my pictures and finding an image, and that will add it in. And there you see it added the image there. Another idea that you could do is you can actually use the Bing safe search. So maybe I want to remind students of some things that they could include and have that as my background. I could put that there. So you can see you can use the Bing safe search, or you can add your own images, and then you just hit finish. And then your activity is created. Now, this is going to show what it would look like. The other thing that you could do, if I click finish editing, oops, and then start, you'll be able to see what it looks like when you do that activity. There's for the students to join, and here's an example of what that slide would look like. Now, one thing that's not wonderful about these that are created in Lumio is the font size. You can see characterization is quite small, as well as internal and external. Another way to do it is to go ahead and save your PowerPoint slide as a JPEG and then insert that as the background for your shout it out. In this Schoology course, I have posted a job aid if you need help saving a PowerPoint slide as a JPEG. You can save a bunch of slides at once as JPEGs, or you can just save one. It's up to you. And that will help you make these shouted out slides. Okay, so if you don't want students to have to all log into a computer just to do a shout it out, like say you're going to do it as an SEL when the students walk in the morning, you can do that. And then right here, just go ahead and up this number to, whatever, however many students maybe that you have in the class. And then when you do that, you just have to log on to one computer with the class code and then leave it up. And then students can just add their response as they come in. So this would be one way to get students to take part in this activity without all having to log into a computer. So I encourage you to go ahead and create at least one shouted out slide and then try using it over the next few weeks. During our next trainings, we'll come back and do a little bit more in Lumio. The idea is to just try this in little bits, see what works, see how you can use it so that you're becoming more familiar with this tool. Please reach out to me if you have any additional questions. Thank you.